Good morning, everyone. My name is Megan Phillips, and I'm the Business Development Manager for Castle Group in Texas. Thank you for tuning into our webinar. Today, we are talking about the importance of community association maintenance. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We have muted all the participant devices to eliminate background noise so everyone can hear clearly. The view options on your screen can be adjusted to display today's speaker by navigating to View Options on the toolbar. Select the side-by-side option for optimal view. Feel free to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation by navigating to the Q&A option on the toolbar. The Q&A portion of the webinar will begin at approximately 11:45 a.m. And now to introduce our expert. We are excited to have Megan Hockett Harrison with us today. With 15 years in the finance and insurance industry, Megan currently specializes in educating homeowners, board members, and property managers by insuring over 1,500 condominium, townhome, and homeowner associations nationwide. Megan ensures she and her team are assets to their clients by staying up to date with insurance market trends. She is a certified insurance counselor and certified risk manager, and is involved in the Community Associations Institute, the Independent Insurance Agents of Dallas, and the Independent Insurance Agents of Texas. Welcome, Megan. We're so glad to have you today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So we are talking all today about some tips and tricks, things that can happen, that these associations can get together and do to be really just proactive rather than reactive in any case that we can. So we're going to take a look at some things here. Like I said, on our agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of maintenance that an association can have to complete, as well as building your maintenance program and what that means, as well as some roles and responsibilities throughout the association for everybody from board members, as well as your community managers, and maybe also some business partners that you could bring into the mix. So like Megan said, a little bit about myself. I did graduate from Texas A&M University. I have been all over the place as far as finance, as well as banking, and now in insurance. I've been in insurance for about 8 years now, 7, 8 years. And I do strictly specialize in insuring condo associations and homeowners associations. And I do it day in and day out, and am always trying to soak up any bit of new knowledge and changes that are rolling with the punches that I can do for all of my clients. So to start out here, it really is so important for board members to not only understand your obligation as a board member for your association, but also to make sure that you are actively searching and seeking out any kind of way to get those done. So, making sure to seek out education, whether that be courses in your local area, your local CAI clubs and whatnot. But there's lots of different resources and tools out there to really make sure that you're doing everything that you can do for the community as a board member. We're going to be taking a look at a lot of different things that intertwine and connect together to really help y'all to succeed. But conducting preventative maintenance in your association can save the association so much money. You're looking at up to 545% return on investment over time. It can help you to lower carbon emissions, and as well as increasing the community stability, which is really what these communities are in place for. The happier everybody is, the better. So we're going to take a look at some ways to make that happen. We've got, like I said, a couple different kinds of maintenance out there. Obviously, I think we know what the word corrective means. So it's when we see something has gone awry, it's a way to fix those things, really. Anything from your buckling, retaining walls to anything concrete related on your sidewalks, your curbs, your roads, if those are private, maintained roads by the association, as well as anything to do with landscaping and just things that come up that kind of are oh shoot moments that we need to fix. We'll talk a little bit as an insurance agent. I do see a lot of maintenance things that come up, some general wear and tear that obviously we know are really, for the most part, not covered on the insurance policy for the association. But those are things that we want to get fixed so that we can move forward with those up to date things for the community. So here are some examples for you of some of those corrective maintenance. Again, like I said, even graffiti, things of that nature. Not everything is covered on the insurance policies, but they are case by case situations. So that's another great reason to have a really good insurance agent in your corner that you can talk to. And if something comes up that maybe isn't quite insurance related, I would hope that, you know, your insurance agent can lead you in the right direction, at least to getting some of those questions answered. But yeah, here's some of those examples for your corrective maintenance. And then on the next screen, we've got some other different kinds of maintenance that come up, which we're going to call preventative maintenance. So these are going to be things that just, instead of coming up that we see, like I said, such as the graffiti or cracks or things like that, these are going to be things that we can really tighten up and make whole and make new so that moving forward, we can preserve the value and preserve really everything to do with these common area property. Like I said, anything from touch-up paint on some of your fencing. That's something that you wouldn't see as quite corrective, but it's just going to spruce up the community and it's going to help out that material as well. So we've got just cleaning up, making the community just to be in tip-top shape. Like I said, the more stable the community is, the happier your homeowners are going to be. So more smiles, less lawsuits. I think we're all happy all around with that. But just these are some examples, such as your waterproof sealants, things that are going to preserve that property over time, because we're looking into the less amount that you do now, or the more you do now, the less you'll have to do later. So you do a little bit over time. And that is going to come up here on this next slide, that we're going to talk a little bit about how, like, what a maintenance plan is and how we're going to create it. And we've got just a step-by-step situation here. First and foremost, you're definitely going to want to review the covenants for the association. That is your rule book, as you know. And so that's a very important place to start, as well as your reserve study, if there is one in place. Again, reserve studies are not my forte as an insurance agent, but I can definitely at least lead people in the right direction to bring those business partners in to put those into place. And we all know, whether you're a board member or a community association leader of any kind, a manager, that those two things are very, very important. So seek out your covenants, see what those say as far as any kind of maintenance. Maybe that's a good time to brush up on the reserve study and the covenants to see if any updates need to be made. So you're going to start there. Now we're going to take a look at, as far as all of the property within the association, you're going to take a look at which items are manufactured components and which ones are not. So some of those manufactured components may have a warranty in place. So that might be some really good information to have when you're talking about upkeep, and if anything goes wrong, how to fix that. So you want to take a look at that. Obviously, some manufactured components might be a playground, it might be a swimming pool, might have anything to do with your amenity center if you've got those different amenities within your association. But it's good to kind of break those in two to say, okay, here's our manufactured components. And then you've got things such as your retaining walls, your gates. Gates may have a warranty on them. Just taking a look at every little bit that the association's responsible for and breaking that down. Walking the community and building a spreadsheet. Walking the community is something that seems very simple and sometimes is overlooked, but really just taking a stroll throughout the community, you might have missed something that otherwise you weren't going to remember, such as lights. You know, you've got your little lights at the beginning of the association that you might just forget about. So little things like that. We might have mailbox kiosks that are easy to forget about. Just things of that nature. So walk in the community, really just taking a look at what you've got and certain things that can be maintained over time. Speaking with the community manager as board members, you know that that is your partner in crime. That's somebody you want to have a very close relationship with, because they're your person to go to bat for you on a lot of different things and to help you to walk hand in hand and partner up with some of these other business partners that you may have to get involved. Which are going to be your contractors, as well as your reserve analysts, to really determine how often certain things need to be inspected and maintained. Different items are going to have different timeframes on them. So that's really important to figure out which items need to be maintained and up to date compared to others. Which items should have preventative maintenance conducted. Like I said earlier, you've got some items that need that preventative and some are going to be corrective. So taking a look at those. As well as having a licensed and insured contractor and inspector to lock arms with to conduct those inspections on the property to determine one, if the status of what the status of the property is, and two, when it needs to be inspected. So really highlighting on the licensed and insured contractor part, you want to make sure, one, that they know what they're doing, but two, that they've gone through the proper steps to really make sure they're licensed and insured. In case anything happens, you can never be too careful. Also keeping track on a sign-off sheet showing what maintenance inspection is done, when it's done, and by who. So once we're able to figure out step by step what needs to be done and when it needs to be done, then it's as simple as having that sign-off sheet. It may be once a quarter, it may be once a year on certain things, but we just want to make sure that we've got a simple sign-off sheet in place to be organized. So that's really what your maintenance plan is. It's really pretty self-explanatory in the name. You're just going through the property and making sure that you've got a plan in place for it. Like I said, if we can be proactive rather than reactive, in a lot of cases, it's really, truly going to help. Insurance, as we all know, is in place for a lot of catastrophic events. And so if there's a way to prevent insurance claims, we want to try to do that if at all possible. We all know, being in Florida and in Texas, what the status of insurance is. Texas is starting to catch up to Florida as far as being uninsurable. And so it's something that Texas has never seen as a state in the history of insurance. And it's something that we're going through right now pretty quickly and pretty abruptly. So we want to, my goal is to really just be an asset for my community managers and my boards to make sure that we're doing everything possible to help you to be successful and to be a happy, thriving community. So Your preventative maintenance manuals, these are going to go hand in hand with your maintenance plan. This manual is going to provide you some information on the common area building components and other common areas, even those often not listed in the reserve study. So a lot of times, whenever I am shopping the insurance for one of my associations, we will ask for a statement of values, which is just simply a list of the common area property that the association is responsible for. A lot of people will try to provide a reserve study and say, here you go, here's the property. Well, it may not have everything listed within the association or vice versa. So that's something that having a reserve study, I cannot stress how important and how useful that can be to have that reserve study. Because really, again, a reserve study is just showing you over time, usually the span of about 30 years, based on the age of the current property. It really just shows you when you need to replace it or when you need to maintain it. That's going to be things like your retaining walls, your anything drainage related, structural concrete. Those are things that we really are not thinking too much about insuring a lot of times, but that's going to be things that we need to have a plan for those in the future as well. A manual is going to include a maintenance plan that's specific to each community. We all know that communities are very, very different from one to the next. There's over 350,000 community associations within the US right now, and that number is growing quickly. I know here in Texas it's growing very quickly, and that's all over the country. So every association is very different. This is not a cookie cutter product that you can just put on an association. You really get deep within each association to make sure that it's catered to each of those associations. Comprehensive manual should include the following. You're going to have photos and you're going to have maintenance information for certain structures, your landscaping, your hardscaping, and any amenities that you've got as well. We've got biweekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, and annual inspection schedules. So like I said earlier, depends on the property as to how often you're going to be inspecting it and maintaining it. It's going to have your site plans, your maintenance exhibits, and any information, like I said earlier, for those manufactured products as well. So it's going to be in a nice, neat notebook with a bow on top. And so it's going to help you to stay organized and on top of those things. But who do we expect to do these things? And between board members, community managers, and everybody else in between? Well, we're going to have what's called a maintenance manager. So this individual in this job assists the community manager and the board on the various programs. Here are some examples of things that need to be maintained and looked at throughout the community. Again, this doesn't apply to every single association in the country, but we've got things like landscaping, pest control, janitorial, possibly fire and life safety. If you have a body of water, whether it's one that gets swam in or not, we need to take a look at life safety and making sure that you've got things such as signs up by that body of water. If it's a pond or a lake, you may want to say no swimming or putting those rules up. You've got to have pool rules, of course, but we also need to take a look at that for any kind of body of water that somebody could trip and fall and potentially lose their life in. So these are some, and this is a really great photo here of a way of how everybody's going to work together. Essentially, that community manager is there to oversee and to be an asset for the board. The board is ultimately there to be the ones in charge of the association and to make sure that the rules are being upheld. And so adding the maintenance manager in with them is really just going to help the community to thrive. So having a specific maintenance manager is really key so that you've got that organization and structure to really help the community succeed. Now, we have been talking a ton about these maintenance plans, but why should they be in place for these associations? Like I've said already, the first one, healthy and happy community and homeowners. That's first and foremost what comes to my mind when I think of a thriving community that is organized and it is maintained. Like I said, you've got those happy homeowners that are happy to be living in the association. They're proud to be living here. And ultimately, there's less lawsuits, but there's less unhappiness. There's less nitpicking, there's less that the board has to hear negatively. So that's a plus. But ultimately, higher market value of the homes because of the upkept surroundings, that is really the reason these associations are in place in the first place. Instead of a homeowner having a home and then having a pool they have to upkeep, they live in a community where they have access and they pay in to living in this tight knit community where they're able to use these amenities without having to each have their own individual ones, if that makes sense. So not only is it going to help the market value, but it's ultimately going to provide some financial savings for the association. Preserving and enhancing the lifestyle, again, if everything is looking nice and new and refreshed all the time, then it's going to be making everybody happier. Not only that, but doing these things a little bit over the span of X amount of years instead of really having to just hone in on these things all at once is really going to save the association money in the long run. If you're just touching up paint instead of having to paint an entire fence all at once, it's going to add some benefit there. Reduction of lawsuits. Like I said, all these really tie together, not only from less accidents that are happening, but also your happier homeowners. Less accidents. We all know that, whether it be a little hole in the grass that somebody trips and falls in, if there's a crack and somebody's riding their bike, that crack causes them to fall on the ground. It could be any of a number of things that could happen. So keeping that maintenance up is really going to prevent a lot of lawsuits, a lot of claims, a lot of injuries. The community manager has the tools needed to steer the community in the right direction, which means less emergency calls at 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday. So that's a big plus. Ultimately, all of these work hand in hand to help the association. Now, there are 3 keys. We're talking about a whole lot of things, but really it comes down to these 3 keys, how to build a successful building maintenance program. First step in creating a successful maintenance program overall, we talked about a maintenance plan earlier, which is part of the whole maintenance program, but it's having a maintenance plan or manual and performing the accompanying inspections. So you've got a plan in place. Now you've got to enforce it. You've got to make sure that that sign-off sheet is getting used. The second is to make the repairs or corrective maintenance discovered during the inspections that are reported. So if homeowners are stating there's something that they found, if your inspector or an adjuster, an appraiser comes out and finds these things, it's not always something that we want to hear whenever something needs to be fixed or updated. But if we can do those a little at a time now versus doing more later, it's going to make a big plus in the long run. But third, performing preventative maintenance in addition to these repairs so that over time there are lower and fewer building components breaking down. obviously we know that that's the case. If we can fix one thing, one small part of a large thing, instead of having to repair, replace it in its entirety, that's obviously going to save quite a bit of money there. So, well, I appreciate the time. I'm sorry I have been talking very quickly, so it's gone a little lower, a little bit than I had anticipated, but I am available and happy to answer any questions that anybody's got.
We do have some questions that came in. The first one is, do you have any recommendations when it comes to appraisers or contractors?
So, as an insurance agent, I am constantly um, measuring risk in everything that I do. It really affects my personal life sometimes because I just constantly am thinking about the things that could go wrong. One of those things is giving out recommendations. So as an insurance agent, I'm not giving out specific recommendations. I can tell you that within the CAI community, there are lots of really, really great business partners that are involved. And so you can always take a look at the directory within CAI. That's a great place to start, to finding where do I find an inspector to come out and do this? Where do I find these reserve analysts that can help us to create a reserve study? So these are just a few examples of the many business partners that you can find. Google's always a good place, but CAI does really take a look and take into account the professionalism of their business partners. So that's a great place to start.
And then Gerald is asking, do you recommend security cameras and a maintenance program for those security cameras?
I would say that typically it depends on the amount of amenities that an association has as to if you really see those security cameras as an investment. I do see one of the biggest claims that I see within associations are on self-closing gates, self-opening gates. So it's always going to be one story versus another. So if there is camera proof, that always is helpful, and adjusters do take those cameras into account. Um, that's going to be one of your manufactured components, more than likely, that the camera company may be offering you a warranty or some kind of protection plan when you purchase them. So always ask about that. I'm sure if they're in place, they would say something up front. But I'm personally on the side of, I think that cameras are always a good idea. There is vandalism happening. Like I said, there's graffiti. There could be anything happening that it's better safe than sorry, in my opinion.
The next question is any maintenance covered under the HOA's insurance policy? It's a great question.
Yeah, so there is some instances. Insurance is not a great one to, I always tell my community managers, insurance does not work very well in hypotheticals because there's a lot of different situations, a lot of variables that are taken into account whenever a claim is filed or when an issue arises. And so there could be things covered under association insurance. I will say that your general wear and tear, I have not seen it covered. I can also say that a lot of times, I'm not quite as sure in Florida. I think it's very similar to Texas. There's not a lot of earth movement happening as far as earthquakes, things of that nature, for the most part. But that kind of coverage is usually one that needs to be added on separately. There's usually an earth movement exclusion. And I say that because erosion, as well as earth movement of any kind, whether it's an earthquake or not, are typically excluded on an insurance policy unless you request it to be added. So if that ground is moving and it's caused a shift in your retaining wall, there are a lot of instances where that's not covered. So you may want to just take a look at your insurance policy, talk with your agent about that if that's an issue in your community, or you could foresee that being an issue in the future.
And then the next question we have is, how often do you recommend that maintenance needs to be done?
So that's a very good question, and it's one that really just depends on the property. So your wrought iron fences may not need to be inspected and maintained quite as much as maybe a wooden fence or even your retaining walls. So that would be a great place to go back to your reserve study. And if you don't have a reserve study, no matter the size of the association or the amount of amenities that are in place. I insure associations as small as 5 or 10 units that have no property that they have to insure, all the way up to some very large, extravagant associations. And I do recommend a reserve study and just a general inspection done every so often. But if you haven't done it in the last 3 to 5 years, highly recommend that right now. Just due to the state of insurance right now, it's always good to have an updated plan.
The next question is, what if an HOA doesn't have any amenities?
So that goes into it. You would think that taking a look at these associations, you would think, oh, we don't have a playground, we don't have a swimming pool or a clubhouse. So we have less at risk, which that part is correct, but less at risk still means that there are risks. So really just again having an inspector come out, possibly an appraiser, depending on the amount of amenities that you've got, and also having that reserve analyst really just take a look at what all you've got going on. Again, great place to start is going to be your covenants, your rule book, to see what the association responsibility is for, because even if there's not a lot of amenities per se, even if you've got something like a front entrance sign or a monument, even if your roads are private, that's something really big to make sure that you're maintaining for a lot of different reasons.
Well, I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you so much, Megan. That was very informative. Really great to hear about maintenance from an insurance expert's point of view. So we really appreciate you being here today. And this webinar will be on our website for anybody that would like to refer back to it at a later date or share it with somebody else. It will be available within the next 24 hours on our website under resources.
Thank you so much for having me, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.